given the pace of change in society at the moment, given what's going on around us and how schools are struggling to keep up with that, I think there needs to be a kind of curriculum of unlearning so that it makes and creates a space for you to relearn.
We need to have social responsibility in this world today, and we need to be thinking about how children can be responsible for our world and the future of it.
Bonjour! Welcome to White Walls! My name is Mathieu Penaud. I am a product manager and learning experience designer, passionate about the role of design and technology in education and learning. In this podcast, I interview inspiring educators, researchers, designers, and innovators to discuss their journey and insights as they imagine and build the future of learning. If you enjoy the show, please share your favorite episode with fellow parents and educators, and make sure you don't miss our next guest by following White Walls on your favorite podcast platform, or even better, by subscribing to White Walls' free newsletter on Substack. Thank you for being part of the conversation, and now, your episode. Today, for the first time on White Walls, I have not one but two wonderful guests joining me from London, Emma Callow and Tom Doust. Emma and Tom are colleagues as they both work at the Institute of Imagination in London, a wonderful place that designs, delivers, and champions creative learning experiences across the arts, sciences, and digital technologies. Emma is a creative content lead at the Institute of Imagination, bringing 18 years of experience working with children, families, educators, schools, and marginalized communities. She is deeply committed to inclusive learning, particularly for neurodivergent learners. As a learning experience designer and STEAM content creator, Emma and her team explore, experiment, and test new ways to blend hands-on, playful learning with innovative approaches, using the latest trends, tools, materials, and technologies to inspire curiosity, exploration, and collaboration in children. And Tom Doust is Associate Director at the Institute of Imagination. A social innovator, Tom has spent over 20 years designing and delivering creative, multi-stakeholder programs with children, young people, families, schools, and communities across the education, design, and cultural sectors. He has worked with national and local governments on transformational education programs. He's a design council expert and a Lego Education Academy certified trainer, as well as a fellow of the RSA. And today, we will discuss imagination and the research about imagination in learning approaches before diving deeper into their work at the Institute of Imagination and the social impact that they have on local communities. So Emma, Tom, thank you so much for joining the conversation on White Walls. Welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you.
Absolutely brilliant to be here.
I'm so glad to have you both here. It's going to be a very fun podcast, I think. And I'm going to start with what I do usually, which is rapid fire questions. It's going to be very quick questions to answer. First thing that comes to your mind. If there's some things you want to elaborate, feel free. And I'll start with, where did you grow up? And maybe Emma, you want to start first, and then Tom?
Okay, so I grew up in Sussex, in the countryside, on a farm.
And I grew up in quite a different environment. I grew up in London, surrounded by the city and lots of busyness and cultural activity and great stuff like that.
And where do you live now?
Me, I live in Winchester. I've moved back from London to the countryside now, so back to the bumpkin life.
Were you missing the countryside life?
I was actually. I really enjoy it. For me, it calms me being in nature. So not that there's not nature in London, but there's a lot more. I can be outdoors. I'm a bit of an outdoors girl. So yeah.
And Tom, still in London?
No, so I spent my youth trying to escape London. I found it just too much sometimes, a bit overwhelming, although I got a lot from it. So I think I have the best of both worlds. I live just outside London. I have nature. I have access to kind of the countryside, but I'm also really close to London. So I feel like that I'm very lucky to be in that position, to have those two options. I can jump on a train and be in London in half an hour, or I can be on a footpath and walking in nature within 10 minutes of my home. So yeah, that feels like a good balance.
Awesome. Who was your favorite teacher?
Debbie, this Australian lady at Newcastle College. She was just the most eccentric person that allowed you to do absolutely anything. So I went to do drama at Newcastle, and she just kind of embodied the spirit of, letting us kind of be free with our imagination and going for it and just seeing what happens. So yeah.
So yeah, for me, I'm going to go back to primary school and formative years, obviously. And I had a fantastic teacher who had a brilliant name. He was called Mr. Rainbow. And aside from being a really great teacher, he took us out on the weekends to sort of into like the cultural richness of London. So he was a music teacher, but he also took us to concerts, to theatre. And growing up in London, it's a real privilege to be able to access that culture, right? But you need to unlock it. You need someone there to break it down for you, to open it up. And my parents did that a bit, but this teacher also did it, and it took me to some really fantastic places and spaces that makes me realize why I love London so much, what it offers. So yeah, I was super lucky.
Oh, that's wonderful. And what is one thing that all kids should learn at school?
I'll jump
Whoever
in.
wants to
I'll
go
jump in
first.
first. Yeah, I think that given the pace of change in society at the moment, given what's going on around us, and how schools are struggling to keep up with that, I think there needs to be a kind of curriculum of unlearning, so that it makes and creates a space for you to relearn. And I think to some extent, children are doing that anyway, right? That they're learning from YouTube, they're learning from new tools that they're using at home, or they're learning from things they're exposed to through technology. But I worry that in the school environment, they go backwards rather than forwards. So just opening up that space for them to say, you know what, actually, let's take a step back from what you think you've learned, because actually that might not be right for the future, and let's relook at things in a different way.
Mm.
I mean, mine's kind of similar along the lines, but mine's more about values. So, like understanding values of like kindness and compassion and resilience. So, I kind of think that those are kind of really key things that children need to be learning in lots of different ways. I mean, we're all about creativity, but I do believe that creativity with those three words of kindness, resilience, and compassion can bring a lot to children and their learning.
Yeah, agree. And what is one thing that all adults should learn at work?
They should go back to splash in puddles and learn how to play. I'm a kind of, like in work, you can be really serious, and work is meant to be joyful. So actually, kind of coming out of the work situation, bringing back the joy, remembering why it is that you are together. So for me, it's about getting to know each other and bringing joy moments.
Yeah, I'd agree with that wholeheartedly. And I think there probably aren't enough workplaces like that. But I think there's this element of like at work that you're kind of always seeking the right answer. You've got to be right, and that's the kind of outcome that you're looking for. And actually, how can we create an environment at work where sometimes you're not right, and that's okay, and you're learning from it, and there's very little room or maneuver for like making mistakes. So yeah, not always being right or trying to be right.
Yeah, that's a nice one. Yeah. Going back to kind of what you do on a day to day, what is your favorite tinkering or making activity?
Oh, I love this one. Can I go first, Emma?
Yeah, go for it.
So I don't think you can go wrong with a good old-fashioned Rube Goldberg machine, a kind of chain reaction. I know Emma loves these as well, and it's not just restricted to children. I think adults as well. You can get them into that kind of space, but there's something about it. There's a kind of highs and lows. There's a cause and effect. There's this kind of notion of just total randomness, and you discover and find things by testing and iterating and trying things out, and it doesn't really have a purpose, and that's fine, which is good sometimes. It sort of breaks away from that kind of need to always have an outcome or a purpose for something, and it just takes you somewhere that is completely unknown, and you don't know where you're going to end up. So yeah, that's just such a favorite of ours, and we use it and have used it a lot, not just as I said with children. We've used it with adults as well. Like we used it with the in this country, a group of people from the BBC who a creative media organization, but is an organization that works in silos, and actually just using it and unlocking and opening up opportunities for them to think creatively was a really great tool.
Yeah, such a great tool for collaboration, for sure. What about you, Emma? I'm sure you love Rube Goldberg as well,
I
as
love
we all
Rube
do.
Goldberg. Like, I love Rube Goldberg. I went on maternity leave when they built the Rube Goldberg machine, and I was really disappointed, like, about having a baby over building the Rube Goldberg machine. Obviously, I was very pleased with my baby, but so I think my favorite activity, and it was actually like one of the first activities that I learned at the IOI, and it's super super simple, and I've done it now probably about hundreds of times, and it's literally tape, sugar paper, and kind of craft materials. And it's literally about getting the tape and sticking it everywhere in the room and building kind of architecture. And it's all about building an immersive space. And you do this with like groups of children, and you just see the spaces that they design very immediately. They're kind of quickly prototyping, and then you can rip it down and you can start it again and kind of figure out how they want to build it and what way they want to build it and what they want to put in it and how they want to imagine it. So I just think that's one of my favorite activities for just really igniting kind of imagination, from starting from nothing to kind of coming into a bigger immersive space.
Awesome, I love it. And using like simple materials, like recycled materials, it's always like a nice like go-to. All right, what is the latest thing that you did for work?
Latest thing I did for work. Okay, I think we're today even just at the end of bringing together a lot of data from work that we've been evaluating, which is really exciting. And it's kind of like you're on this journey, and you can see the end of the tunnel. You can see the light at the end of the tunnel, and you're journeying towards it. And you've experienced kind of interviews, or you've gathered kind of case studies, and you've collected data. And now you want to kind of crunch it and bring it all together and make some sense of it. So that is what's currently what we're in the thick of at the moment, to sort of bring that all together and being able to sort of tell a story, if you like, from the impact work that we've done. Yeah, so lots of evaluation, but I geek out about that stuff. It's great.
So I'm currently working on a project with a secondary school at the moment, which is designing, like using the microbit and servo motors to design sculptures. And this is about working with year 7, year 8 and year 9 to think about power skills that they need to kind of develop, and combining it with computing and the art department and coming together. It's really exciting. They're kind of trying to figure out how they can combine different subjects into kind of one, so that children are not just kind of focused on just art or just computing. It's about combining them together to kind of do creative learning.
Love it, love it. One last rapid fire question. We talked about work. Now, what is the latest thing you did to relax?
Oh, I can tell you this. I did life drawing yesterday. And I took my friends along, and it's the first time I've done it since university. Honestly, it was the best thing that I've done in so long, because I walked in and they were like, right, sit down, ready to go. You've got 30 seconds to draw this. Boom, boom, boom. You got another 30 seconds to draw another pose. You've got 1 minute to draw this, 2 minutes to draw this, and then you have 10 minutes, and you've got 20 minutes. 20 minutes felt quite a long time. But it was just really wonderful to be super focused, but with like 35 people around in a room, being really creative.
Oh wow, I've never done that. I would love to try.
That sounds great. Yeah.
It was really good.
Yeah.
Mine is a bit more meditative. So over the weekend, so like we're in the season of candles, right? Like there's lots of candles this time of year, and we've got some candles in our kitchen that we're sort of burning in line with Christmas, and so my wife was like, "Oh, have you ever done like candle meditation?" I was like, "What's that?" And basically, you kind of stare at a candle. I don't know if you've ever done it before. You stare at a candle for as long as you can, keeping your eyes open, and then when you can't keep your eyes open anymore, you shut your eyes. And the image of the candle then obviously emerges, and you kind of just get lost in that moment. And it's just a great moment to stop and pause and reflect. And yeah, that I think is so important in life.
Very nice. Yeah. Another thing I need to try, I guess.
I'm going to try that with my kids tonight.
Yeah. It worked. Yeah, it worked with our kids too.
Thank you so much for answering these rapid fire questions. Now we'll get into the main part of this conversation. What I love to start with is a little bit of reflection on like your personal journeys from like where you started to where you are now. Like, how do you feel when you look back at what you've accomplished, what you went through, what your journey like looks like? Maybe Tom, if you want to start.
Yeah. So I guess my journey's always been punctuated by participation, participation of people, and within that as well, a kind of an empowerment of people, and particularly young people and children and young people. So I kind of feel like that's a golden thread running through my career. Like right at the beginning of my career, with colleagues, I set up a youth empowerment charity, which provided the opportunity for young people to make a difference, a positive difference to the world on their terms. And I think that set a really good tone for my kind of career and my life journey, really, which is that we need to trust in people. We need to empower them to make decisions. We need to enable them to feel like they're going to participate in the world and contribute towards the world, and then you have a happy and healthy society. And then I guess along that journey, I've always really been interested in design. Design from a kind of creative perspective. Both my parents were designers and immersed me in that world. So I always think that a design lens or looking through a kind of design outlook is really key, and has always played a really really important role too. And the principles of design, like what makes good design, what is participative design, how do you design for your end users, how do you use the iterative design process to come up with the right things. And then I guess that plays out again back into that kind of participation. How do the people that you're designing a service for participate in what you're designing? And we use models of co-production, or starting more and more to use models of co-production here at the Institute of Imagination, and it's been something that I've been really interested in throughout my career. And then I guess technology's always been there. As a kid, I absolutely loved growing up in the world of pixels and 8-bit computers and all that kind of fun stuff. And I've just loved growing up in an era which has just been unprecedented. Right, we've had so much technological innovation, and there's good things about it and there's challenging things about it, but generally it's just really exciting to be involved in this era, and again to sort of shape it, to sort of participate in it, and learn how you can utilize new technological tools and enhance your creativity and imagination with them, and see what's possible. So yeah, I think those are some of the ingredients I'd sprinkle into my journey. And I guess underpinning all of that is the fact that I've always, what drives me is making a difference for people who are perhaps from less advantaged positions than I've been from. So I've always worked with underserved and underrepresented communities, and so I know that there are opportunities out there for many, but not for all. And so how can you have the best social impact? How can you make your work positive? So I've always worked in the non-for-profit, what we call charity sector here in the UK. I've dedicated my career to that. And yeah, I think that's even more important today than it ever has been, because we're in challenging times.
Yeah, thank you for sharing all that. That's very inspiring as well. And Emma, when you reflect on your own journey, how does it feel?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like a great sense of pride, but also gratitude, like for how far I've come. And I think, firstly, like you don't often get asked this question, like to reflect on your journey. So it's quite a nice one to kind of to think about. And I think you're really grateful, like for some of the decisions that your parents have made, but also you're really grateful, like for some of the people that you've met along your journey to kind of that have made you who you are now. And I think, probably like Tom, I've always been really interested and curious and like had a real passion for like learning. And I suppose like a long time ago, well, I'm not that old, but like I didn't really have a clear vision of like how it was going to pan out. I didn't know what it is that I wanted to do. But I knew that I was curious, and I knew that, there was kind of a bit of a wild imagination in this head, and I kind of had to use it somehow. But I think there are a couple of people that are like my biggest influences that that have really helped me. My mum, she showed me learning that could be something really different, and we were, as I said, we grew up in the countryside, and we were very much left to our own devices. And when I mean that, I mean I'd be lying in fields waiting for cows to be born, or like sheep, or I kind of stick my head in the chicken coop and like wait until the eggs kind of came out the bottom and go, right, okay, I get it. Like, there was kind of a sense of a wonder of like, how does this work? Or I'd go and build dens with my brother, and we'd shake nuts and we'd test it with cows going over the top and wait for their like legs to go through. So it was kind of a very natural, kind of a immersive kind of environment of kind of testing and experimenting. So I've always liked kind of experimenting. And then I think the biggest move that my mum made, like for me when I was younger, I was really dyslexic. School was just like very rigid, and it just didn't really work, for me. I didn't understand a lot of things. When I look back on it, I think, oh God, I really didn't understand what was going on. And she took me out of school for one day a week, and I worked in a Steiner school with her. And that's kind of where I learned about hands-on learning and working with like neurodivergent adults. And that kind of set my zest for people and how loving people. And then the other inspiration was Camilla Batmangeli. She was like the visionary of like Kids Company, and I worked there for 7 years. And I worked on like therapeutic education programs there, working with some of the most at-risk youth in London. And I think that taught me about like holistic, hands-on approaches, and that people from disadvantaged communities, they grow up in environments that that do shape them, and their behaviors. But the wonderful thing about Kids Company that taught me, when I reflect and think about it, is that new learning experiences, love, and I say love because, like, when you go to like a meeting or a conference and you say love, like, what do you mean love? Like, that's not a thing. But love is like really important to kind of giving grounding, and it's like a humanistic thing that people need in order to reshape. So there I learned about delivering playful experiences that help reshape and give new perspective. And then the last thing is IOI. Like, I came here, and the first person I met was this lady called Vicky Kay. And she said that she played for a living. And I was like, you play for a living? I was just like, how's that a job? I was like, I want that job. Like, so she was kind of a bit of an idol for me. And I think here, it's just kind of been really transformational over the last 10 years, like understanding how to design blended experience and play. And like Tom, I mean, we've kind of been a little bit of partners in crime. And I just think, Tom has been a great partner in crime because he's very open, and he allows you to kind of test things and experiment things with your team of like incredible creatives. And I think that's had a massive impact on me.
Yeah, thank you. It's funny, I feel like I heard some of the unlearning that Tom was talking earlier that happened during your journey as well, and like discovering new ways that you can approach things and kind of embracing that.
And I think it's also, like that unlearning, it's about having the right people like around you that can help you do that.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. And actually that actually links with what I was going to say about how much our childhood influences us. And every time I speak with people on that podcast, like so much of what they share about their parents or where they grew up or how they grew up or like the favorite teacher when they were young, how much that influences where they are like today.
Mm.
And I heard that with both of you. So that also is very interesting, and it kind of reinforces the importance of working also with young children and making sure that all of them have the opportunity to develop like the skills that they need. So, and I want to start talking about the Institute of Imagination now, because that's where you both work, and it's such a fascinating place with amazing initiatives. But my first question is that when I started like learning about the Institute of Imagination, the first thing that came to mind was, oh, you're using imagination and not creativity, because often we hear like more talking about creativity, like creativity museum, and a little less about imagination. And so I'm wondering why this what was chosen and why it was called Institute of Imagination.
Yeah, great question. Emma, shall I go first or do you want to go first?
You go for it.
Okay, so why imagination? Okay, so I think when you think about imagination, even in our circles, right, where we're immersed by it and we embrace it, it's still seen as quite a frivolous act, right? You know, it's still seen as something that perhaps doesn't have any value or is not tangible, and therefore, how can you work with imagination because it's all up in your head? So that I think that's one reason why we grasped it, because actually it deserves to be front and center stage. You know, it's our greatest human faculty. It separates us from all other species on this planet. It's why we are here today. It's where we are here today. It's, you know, our imagination has created civilization, has created art, has created music, has created scientific discovery, all those things. And yet we very rarely kind of go back to imagination as a starting point. So I think that amplification of the importance of imagination was a key thing. There's also an element of one of our founding patrons, Sir Ken Robinson, who you will know, and probably lots of your listeners will know as well, the late and great Sir Ken Robinson, who talked a lot about creativity, but he also talked about it in the context of imagination, which I think is really important, right? Because I think the creativity is different from imagination, and I think we'll come on to talk about that. But you know, you need to start the process somewhere, and I think imagination is where it all begins. Emma, do you wanna think add some more bits to that?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of think, you know, when you say the word imagination, I mean, actually, Matthew, when I say the word imagination, what do you think of?
I think of people's ability to represent all kind of like images in their head, things that do not exist, and just like projecting some form of, yeah, images, thoughts that are just theirs and just exist in their heads.
And that it's exactly that, like, and I think the magic about imagination is it's the hidden part of you. It's the skill that you can't really see, like, until it kind of comes out. I think that's why it's so hard, like, to measure it as a skill at first, because sometimes when I think of the word imagination, I think of maybe like a big fluffy pink purple clouds, you know, that, like, you know, that may have loads of different things attached to it. Is that critical? Yeah, it is. Like, because, you know, it connects us as humans, and that's really important. And those kind of ideas, you know, drive positive change, whether they are, you know, pink fluffy clouds, or whether they're, you know, trees with hanging chimes off the end of it. You know, it doesn't matter. Like, they're things that connect us as human beings.
Hmm.
And I think just to add to this as well, I think one of the reasons why we set up the organization, the Institute of Imagination, you know, we often, or society looks to the future, right, and thinks, oh wow, you know, there's all these things in the future that are going to be, they're going to come down the line and they're going to have an impact on us. But actually, I think our realization was that future is here now. Let's not talk about it the future. Let's talk about it as today. We're living in unprecedented times in terms of, you know, change, evolution, technological um, automation. All sorts of things are happening in society that really need imagination. And when I say it in that context, I mean we need imagination as a skill to be resilient to change. We need to be able to reimagine. We need to be able to respond to change and reimagine our circumstances, or reimagine the way we do things, to be able to thrive and survive in this world. So I think that's a really important element that Ken Robinson talks about. You know, it allows us to do lots of things, and it allows us to be creative, and I'm sure we'll talk more about that. But it allows us to step outside of the now, the context, and look ahead to the future, you know, learn from the past, but actually just re-look at things in a different way, which I think is really lacking in society today. I think we're very, very siloed. We're very kind of like focused in on trying to find solutions and fix things that that we think we know the answer to, but actually, we need to take more time to reimagine.
Yeah. And first, as I would say, like you mentioned Ken Robinson, and like his book, The Element, is one of the reasons I'm working in education and creative learning. So I love that
Yeah.
you have this connection with him and Institute of Imagination. And the second thing is I have actually two questions that come to mind from like the what you've talked about imagination, which is fascinating. The first one is we're all born with that skill, with the skill of imagination. So the first question is are we all born equal? Do we all have that? That's like the level of imagination or like the skill of imagination. Does it differ between individuals? And the second thing is when we get adults, and you mentioned that we are less and less able to kind of imagine new things, or at least it feels like it. Is it a problem of like nurturing that imagination? Is it a problem of teaching? Like, you cannot teach how to imagine, right? So what's kind of the process to like to keep that skill alive and thriving?
So I think like imagination can be shaped in lots of different ways, like, through play or through curiosity, through questions or through wonder or through interactions with each other. And if you think of it like your brain kind of collects all of those experiences, like right from childhood, like, and in particular, your imagination is really prominent between ages of like 3, 4, right up to kind of I can't remember what the age range is. It's about 8, 9. Like, it's really kind of wild, and and it's really unique, like in a sense, like everybody's is like unique and it's wired in a slightly different way, and I think that's what makes imagination really important, because it's unique in the way it thinks and imagines the world. But also, I think, particularly in creating the Institute of Imagination, you've needed many, many, many imaginations to make the Institute of Imagination, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's like the combination of like you need that combination of ideas and people and their own imagined worlds to collide and eventually build something together.
Yeah,
Is that what you mean?
yeah,
Like a collective imagination.
yeah,
Yeah.
I think your question around are we all equal? Are we all born with an imagination? Absolutely, 100%. From the day we're born, as I said before, I think it's a unique human capacity, faculty. It's something that we're all raised with and born with, and it's a muscle we've talked about in the past. You need to work at it as well. That's key too. And what happens really in life is that it starts great, in the kind of early years. There's the space for you to develop as a child and really express and explore your imagination and use that in terms of your brain development. And then you enter a system. You enter a system, the education system, which I think is solely responsible for educating imagination out of your life. It basically takes away that capital that you're born with. And some people will have better experiences at education than others. But if you look at global education systems, quite quickly we start to muster children into kind of pockets and silos that get them on a rote learning wheel that looks at kind of assessment quite early on as well. Here in the UK, we're one of the most assessed countries in the world. So children are always thinking about having to sit down and do exams and pass and fail and the consequences of that on your education and learning. So I think basically what happens is that education in the modern term becomes a very overcrowded space. And there's focus, obviously, there's agendas from government, but very rarely is there the time or the space or the environment to be able to nourish your imagination. And I think that then sets the trend for as you journey through to kind of secondary or higher education, and as you go on and into the workplace, it becomes very structured environment. So, and that's not an easy thing to fix. But I'm just saying that there's a clear line there, and I think it was a NASA study. You might have come across it before, a decade ago, where they basically did a study of children, and they tested them. They sort of did this kind of test with them, a creativity test with them at 5, at 10, at 15, and it's just a line basically. So they like aced the creativity test or the assessment when they were 5, and then the line started going downhill basically as they journey through their education. So yeah, I just think there's something we need to address here, and that is the education systems. It's not just here in the UK; it's globally as well.
Yeah, and I could see that too. I mean, I saw that in France, in Singapore, uh, and I was thinking also about, let's say, so we all have like the imagination, those like thoughts that can be extremely valuable. How do we get to the next step of making those thoughts like a real thing, like bringing that into the real world? And you talked about that collective imagination, getting into like create the institute of imagination. Like, how do we make that step?
How do we make the step in terms of, sorry, creating the organization we are, or what's the relationship between imagination and creativity?
Yeah, more that was a relation between
Yeah,
imagination and
yeah.
creativity.
And we get asked this a lot because, like, like they kind of go hand in hand, right? I guess one is, like you say, this kind of this visualization process, and it's quite intimate, right? You're having it in your own head and your own mind. Although we talked about collective imagination, which I think is really interesting and exciting moving forward. Um, but I think the relationship and around the definition for us is that, yeah, how can you take that? I guess the moment it becomes a bit more collective and the moment it becomes a bit more social is when you take those ideas, those images, those visualizations, and you apply them to something real. And then when I say real, it could be digital, it could be physical, but it could be a construct. And I guess this lends itself really well to learning theories, obviously things like constructionism, and Seymour Papert, and lots of stuff around that, and we draw off that completely. But yeah, we see children's imagination come alive when they're involved in the making process, in the ability to actually express their imagination through a construct, through something that is physical and real, or a digital kind of image, and also then share it as well, and have pride over it, and say this is a unique idea that I've had.
I think I would say there's one thing to say, like in terms of like schools and kind of imagination. I think like schools have very much changed. You used to do a lot of individual work, and there's like group work, so you can kind of practice your imagination individually, but you can also practice it as a group. And I read this book called Quiet, The World of Introverts, recently, and it taught like it kind of said about like working alone to establish your own imagination and your own thoughts is really important, like to value your own ideas. And then you've got kind of group work where you've kind of got pairs and you're working, but there's always going to be maybe somebody with a slightly stronger imagination than maybe the others. And then you've got larger kind of group work where you're thinking about it kind of collectively, and it's finding a balance of all three of those, because more so we practice imagination as a group now and kind of thinking about ideas. When you go back to you as an individual, the most important thing, that I think is practicing your own imagination and believing in your own imagination, because that is what's gonna, when you look at our stories or anybody's story, it's the imagination, the points where they've seen imagination from somebody else that's kind of given it to you, that's made that spring forward or that connection into creativity. So individual imagination is really, really important.
Hmm.
Love that, Emma.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think that's really interesting in the context of, that we are, as a society, or certainly in the West, in ways that we think we're creative. We are quite creative, right? And you think we've just been through a kind of major blip in society with COVID in terms of giving people a bit more space and time to be creative. But we're artists. We sing. We do all sorts of creative endeavors. So I think a lot of people are expressing their creativity. But I think what Emma's saying is really important. Where is that space and that time to actually reflect deeply on your own personal imagination? Because I think that's the fuel, that's the engine, that's the bit that really gets it going. And creativity then brings that idea to life, and puts the imagination to work.
Yeah, and I feel that as adults we have more and more like mental burden and other things that calls for our attention, and that we definitely like lose like the time and space for doing that.
But you also notice that, you know, that a lot of imagination that may be shown at the moment is coming from quite extrovert kind of people. Whereas, like, if you think about, your audience, and you're thinking about those people that are slightly quieter, or those people with like neurodivergence, how, for me, like, a really big question is like how you unpick imagination for, different learners, like, and how do you kind of like create kind of playful environments where you're finding the right thing for everyone to unpick their own imagination.
I guess that lends itself to this kind of idea of a democratization of imagination. In the past, there have been people who said, "Oh, imagination is it's frivolous, but it could also be quite a unique thing to some people, or you could be privileged to be able to express your imagination. Some people just aren't in that position at the moment because they may be in global conflict or whatever. But actually, I think we need to open that up and democratize that capacity to imagine. And I think that idea of coming together and collectively imagining and seeing hope is something that's very much needed in today's society.
Yeah, 100%. It's interesting because it reminds me of the conversation I had actually on White Walls as well with Ellen Chung, who's working on identifying like play types and how different like children and like individuals have different favorite play ways of playing. And it's kind of like it's a little similar that if you can tap into these favorite modes of like playing, but it can be also communicating, interacting, imagining.
Yeah.
Matthew, actually, after I listened to that podcast, I actually went into a co-creation play session like the next day. And I took some of those, and we were asking children as part of our co-creation plays how they like to play, what they like to play with, like, as to kind of to develop some of our content. And we took that, and we took also the way that kind of teachers like to play as well. So it was a really fab episode.
Oh, I love that. I love the these bridges. It's fantastic. Thank you for sharing that. Another thing I wanted to like bring up in a conversation and like learn more about from you is, so we talked about imagination, we talked about creativity, but you've been working on identifying a set of skills and like core skills and competencies that you think are essential for children to learn. And so there's 8 of them. So there's collaboration, composure, citizenship, compassion, communication, creativity, criticism, and curiosity. And I put a link in the description of the episode to the report that is really, really interesting. I encourage everyone to look at it so you have also like more details. But I wanted to talk about a little bit about how you defined these different skills, why you chose those ones, and maybe there's some of them that you think stand out. I know that for me, when I was reading it, I think like composure and citizenship were 2 of the skills that maybe I've heard less of when looking into like creative learning and 21st century skills. So I would love to hear like the process, how you came up with this, and if you have like some more insights about those skills.
Yeah, I mean they're a work in progress. In a society that values results, academic results, we're pushing up against quite a heavy door in terms of trying to convince people that these are really important. But I think if you look at the global context, then you can see that people are starting to value skills or see the value of skills. And I guess it's skills, but it's also I see them as competencies or characteristics. These are things that are again are quite human attributes that actually are already there. They already exist, but we just need to awaken them or support them or create the space for them. I guess back to the question around like why have we got these 8 C's? You'll notice they all begin with C, so they're the 8 C's. And again, they originated from Ken Robinson's literature. And really what his framing was if you can help support a child to develop these 8 core competencies, then these will be the kind of core values they'll need as they journey into their higher and further and education and life and society and stuff. So these are the things that you need to sort of seeds that you need planted to help you develop and grow as a child and a young person. So we kind of signed up to that. And I think when you look around, and I think you mentioned it as well, that there are other examples of these kind of characteristics in people that we need, right through to actually, global institutions like the World Economic Forum, who talk about some of these characteristics as well, particularly things like creativity and curiosity. So that's encouraging, I guess, to see that we're not just on our own here. That people are realizing that these are hugely important as we develop and grow and as we journey through our education. And then, as a kind of framework, we kind of use them as I guess, a kind of North Star, if you like. So we're always thinking about how we design our projects, our programs, how we interact with our different audiences. And we're always thinking about the elements of these 8 Cs and which elements are coming into the work that we're creating and the outcomes that we're observing from the programs that we're running. So I think that's really important. They hold us true to the value of our work. And then I guess on the composure and the citizenship one, it's interesting. And yeah, and we see when we talk to students and teachers, we don't really use this in a formal way to evaluate our work. We use it, as I said, as a kind of framework. But when we look at those competencies, it's usually creativity and curiosity, communication and collaboration that children and teachers will associate with, or families will as well. So that's an interesting one in terms of just thinking about our education systems or the way that things are structured and set up. That there's more association with those and perhaps less with things like composure and citizenship. But I think Emma's described things like composure quite well, in terms of that. If we can get people into a true imaginative space, then really you are becoming more composed. You're having that ability to connect with a bit more feeling. And we talked very much about tactile experiences, and often those aren't very common in schools these days, particularly maybe in secondary schools. Like practical learning is less common. So that capacity to connect with your head, with your hand and your heart, and to bring those pieces together, I think is really, really important. And citizenship for us, although perhaps isn't relayed much in terms of the feedback that we get, and I think this is common with lots of people that you talk to. We want education to be about the world that children are living in right now. We want this to be relevant to them. We want them to be engrossed and engaged in their learning because it's something that actually has meaning to them, that actually they can relate to. And there's great hope, I think, there in the future around a kind of more personalized learning journey for children. But I think for us, it's about setting up kind of interesting, challenging, real world topics that children can kind of get stuck into. It doesn't really matter if they don't understand what the circular economy means, for instance. But if they go in and start to delve with materials and understand that you can repurpose things in new and interesting ways, which children do very well already, but sort of bring that learning experience into an education space, that's really exciting because they'll take that forward with them. They'll think, okay, yeah, right, stuff is treasure. let's use treasure in the future in our learning.
Yeah. I mean, I wholeheartedly agree, Tom. And I want to add compassion there, in there, because I think compassion, composure, and citizenship, they kind of link together as well. And compassion is really about our pedagogical approach of failure positive, and understanding that and creating safe environments for learning and play. And in encouraging children to kind of share their ideas, and kind of foster empathy and composure, because I know that me and Tom, we had a conversation about this a couple of weeks ago. Composure, also my view on it is it's deeply linked to well-being. Creativity and well-being, they kind of come together. And I think you said that you kind of get into state if you remember what it's like to kind of make, or you kind of have that feeling, you're kind of in that moment, and it's so nice. It's nice for educators to see that you in that moment. And a lot of the time when we do the days for plays, or and you just take a moment, you sit back and you go, oh wow, like they're just all in it. And you think kind of what it does for each person. It does regulate your emotions, like making and playing. It does make you more resilient. When I think about resilience, I think about the moment I was told about engineering. I'm like, what is engineering? Like, how do I make these hobby motors work? Over years and years and years, like, that resilience in creativity creates kind of composure. And then citizenship for me, like, it's about empowering people to help them understand that actually they can help shape the world, like they're part of it. Like, so when Tom said that we give them the context, actually, like, they might be the person in charge, in 20 years time. So actually giving them challenges, real life challenges, helps prepare them and, shape them and kind of embed kind of critical thinking skills. Well, actually, I can change this because I made this like back at school, or like I can design a little prototype because actually it can work. I might not know the next step, but like I've kind of got the foundation skills.
It's like breaking down some mental walls or mental barriers that, like, either breaking them down or like preventing from them building up in our brain. Maybe that would be more more accurate. Yeah, no, I love that. And I'm curious about the space itself of the institute, because I've not had a chance to visit, and I hope I will someday. How do you organize the space and like the kind of activities you can do there? Like, what does it look like into the institute when you walk in?
Yeah, and that's a great question in terms of who we are as an organization. So, you know, our our institute is kind of like this hybrid thing that we work in schools, or we work in communities, or we work at events, or we sometimes are place based, or sometimes pop up. Um, and throughout our decade of our kind of journey, if you like, the organization's been around for about 10 years. We've done various iterations of that. As you can imagine, during the pandemic, we responded in a different way and worked quite differently to how we were pre-pandemic. But I guess the biggest manifestation of the Institute of Imagination that we've developed so far, and this is where Emma definitely comes in helping the organization imagine what this space could look like, is pre-pandemic we were offered a space which was basically an old fire engine service yard. It fixed all London's fire engines, and it was kind of Willy Wonka.
Matthew, it had no lighting, no radiators, it was cold, we had to reimagine.
But it had this kind of colorful piping going through, I guess, from like maybe when they used to extract the exhaust from these fire engines. It was kind of unique in a way, and it was very raw as well. It's like it didn't matter if you made a mess in there because it was already kind of raw. And so we were offered this space just like for free, basically. So we opened up a kind of 3,000 square feet space, which is reasonably sizable, and created an environment where, I guess, we hoped that anyone could step over the threshold. So there's no barriers there. So what do I mean by that? Well, I guess if you look at, say, some of London's polished museums or cultural spaces, you can see for some people that's not for them, or they struggle to break that threshold and walk over the line and go, right, I'm going to go to this art gallery, or I'm going to go to this science center. This is for me. We made it very neutral, and right in the kind of design of the space as well. We got these fantastic architecture designers who made this fantastic furniture, which was, everything was on wheels, so you could move it around and lock it in place. But it was kind of neutral, and it didn't associate with any gender, and it was movable, and you could co-create the space with your audience. And so that was really exciting. So that was like, you suddenly had an environment that was very open, and you could change it, and it was evolving, and it was open to opportunity, I guess. And then the second thing was, we made it a kind of rule that we wouldn't have any predetermined outcomes. So we made it a golden rule that throughout our work, you were never working towards something that had to be completed or finished, or looked like this. Everyone who came in and created in that space was going to create something different and unique. And there was that space and openness and imagination. So real open-ended learning environment. I think the third thing was like the tools and materials we used. So, looking at ways in which we could introduce children and young people and families to new ways of engaging and interacting with tools. And when I say tools, I mean like from cardboard and junk from one end of the spectrum, right through to kind of new technology, new tools that perhaps they don't get to experience in their home or in their school life. And again, experimentation, right? Open to experimentation. Yeah, I'm going to stop there and let Emma pick up the story.
I think when we reflect back on this space, I think we both think that we didn't really realize how great it was at the time, or how amazing a space it was to have, to kind of play. And I think when we started kind of testing out the programs in that space, that was just super exciting. We had like a really fabulous team of like facilitators, like from really diverse kind of careers, that kind of help form the team, which was really important. And we designed like themed kind of creative kind of environments. So I'm trying to think of them now. We did like Recode, which was like a big lab live. And I suppose like these kind of events, they were to almost get a taster of what it's like in different areas in kind of careers or like workplaces, but also it was kind of to tease out different playful ways to kind of maybe tackle kind of coding. So School of Noise might come and do something with music, and the Siobhan Davis Dance Company might come and do dance, and you've got to kind of use your movement to understand kind of pattern and code. It was done in a really playful way where like anyone could get involved, and anyone could kind of test the ground, and you chose the path that you wanted to choose. There was no kind of route that you wanted to go, that you had to kind of go. You could go any route and you could test anything out. And I think that was, those kind of events were about igniting inspiration, but also aspiration. Oh, this is what people do. Oh, I could do this. And I think also like the learning approach, like Tom's kind of talked about it a little bit there. I think that's something that we developed, and there were like moments where you could be really reactive. So it's not just an audience and like a formulaic like workshop that you're giving. You're kind of reacting to the children in the space and what it is that they're doing. And I do remember there was like a moment, and we were doing sound improvology, and we had all of these instruments, and there was all this noise, and it's complete chaos, which is where the learning happens. And we had sometimes you have these educators or teachers that really embrace like creativity, and that's kind of where you can kind of take a moment. And I suddenly kind of came up with this idea. I was like, right, there's about 60 of you. Here's some cups. Go out into this major 12,000 square foot space and do something with cups and sound. And they went off for half an hour, and in the end they did this amazing kind of cup like collaboration of like sound and music. So it was a space to experiment and test, which was one of the best things in the world.
And I think it's rare. I guess it felt like it was rare anyway, particularly in a city like London. Yeah, I think Emma's touched on it, but that partnership was key as well. So like bringing in interesting parties who are working on the fringes of new thinking and new ideas, and exposing children and young people to kind of new topics or new prototypes, and that kind of thinking was also really key, and that brought lots of excitement. And yeah, just to clarify, we had this like 3,000 square feet dedicated space, and then there was the big kind of engine hall, which allowed us to spill out into sort of a 10,000 square feet space. So just having that space to really open up and allow people to come in and experiment. I think when we looked at like measures of success, we always talk about what was your impact and your outcomes. A couple of measures for me were say on a family event, if a parent or a caregiver and a child came into the experience, they looked lost and confused and were like, how do I engage with this? Like, where's the beginning and where's the end? And we're like, there's no beginning and end. You just go and explore. And, they came in confused. They kind of come out like, I get it now. Okay. Or like, I'm so engrossed in the activity that I haven't even looked up for the last couple of hours because it's so engaging to be creating and making. So that was really exciting to see, to take people outside of their, natural comfort zone of what they expected from a kind of cultural learning experience. It wasn't that at all. It was turning on its head and challenging people to think differently.
Yeah, that sounds wonderful. And so you don't have this space anymore?
So yeah, I guess yeah, like you say, we don't have the space anymore, but we have these kind of iterations of what it means. So this
Mm,
pedagogy, this
yeah.
approach, it runs through all our work, whether we're working in an event space, whether we're doing pop-ups, whether we're working through live broadcast, whether we're running hyperlocal events, with communities. So we're kind of I kind of feel like post-pandemic we are a kind of organization, a kind of modern organization that has adapted and is responsive to where the need is. So we still work in live spaces, which is great, but
Mm.
we also do a lot more kind of online or through platforms, through broadcast, and we blend those things together. But ultimately, the experience we're describing, and it might be hard to think, how do you do that when you do a live broadcast? Well, you can empower schools to take on the content. You can broadcast live into their classroom. You can send them materials that are slightly different. You can work with them in a professional context, teachers within a professional context, to kind of change the way that they're teaching and learning, or you can work alongside parents and support them in a process of thinking creatively and imaginatively about your child's education. So yeah, it does manifest itself in many different ways. And that was a great time, but I think the world's moved on now, and there are still amazing spaces, and I can't wait for us to occupy our next one, and we're going to be working more and more in events as we move forward. But I'm really proud of what we're doing at the moment across all platforms.
And I'm curious if you could share maybe like one or two projects or initiatives that you worked on, maybe recently or not, but with the institute that really you feel had. I mean, they all have impact for sure, but like you feel kind of stood out or have a particular impact on a certain community or something that you would like to share, so we can also understand the types of project that you're doing and how it helps children or other individuals from different communities around in London or around the UK.
Yeah, so yeah, I think we work nationally, and we do that through technology, but we also work hyper locally. So kind of we work across this spectrum. And one project I think we're really proud of at the moment is a collaboration with Lego, the Lego Group, and the Lego Foundation, and also some project partners as well, including organisations like Save the Children, which is an international charity, but also Save the Children UK. So here we're looking at the importance or the power of play, and how that perhaps can bring about change, not just in education systems, but across kind of communities, across a microcosm of society. And so we're working in what we call a district or a borough, and it's a place called Tower Hamlets, which is have been identified by a needs assessment as being one of the most underutilized areas where there's least access to play, but where there's great opportunity. And it's very densely populated. It's one of the fastest growing boroughs. And so we've been working in collaboration with three other organizations to try and look at, and systemic's a big word, so I'm not going to use it too boldly, but to look at hopefully long-term change. What happens if you drop in opportunities to rethink how you learn, to use play as a methodology to improve or to enhance or to make more accessible your learning for experiences for children and young people. And so we've been working in schools. That's an area that we really value, and working across a lot of elementary, primary schools, either providing them with our program through live broadcast into the classroom, or by actually going into the school and empowering them to sort of throw their learning wide open, and they've been running things all like days of play where they've gone totally off timetable and used play at the heart of learning in all aspects of what they're doing in the school, or working with their teachers on kind of professional development and thinking about different pedagogies. Our partners Save the Children have been working hyperlocally in communities, co-designing, and thinking of like how play can enhance a child's life through day-to-day activity outside of the school environment. We've been working with an organization called Easy Peasy, who create an app for early years. So quick, kind of fun, playful ways of engaging in learning through play as a parent or as a caregiver with your child from 0 to 5. And then we also have an institution here, which I'm sure everyone's familiar with, called the VNA, and they have the Young VNA in Tower Hamlets. And that's a kind of space for, that's a kind of not a museum as such, but it's kind of like a space for children to come and express their imagination through different galleries and interact. And so that work is for us quite pioneering because it's hopefully over a longer period of time. We've started with a pilot year. We're hoping to go into 1 or 2 more years, but it's just bringing that kind of collective approach to looking at all aspects of a child's life in a local area and trying to find ways in which we can engage in more playful activity for them, so that play becomes something that is like consistent throughout their life and transformative. Yeah, it's a work in progress, but it's really exciting. We're on a journey.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's feels like we're only at the tip of the iceberg, but it's been fantastic to see just what the initial work we've done so far, the kind of impact it's had in terms of the excitement it's developed around play.
And I love how it loops back to you had to imagine this project and you have to work with people who imagine it in some different
Yeah,
ways. Like I know Easy Peasy, there's like a different way to look at
yeah,
playful
yeah. And
learning
work
for
with
families.
the
And
audiences as well, and imagine with them. The co-production has been key to.
yeah,
And what's nice when you come out of those days of play, so we just kind of came out of on a couple of weeks ago, was speaking to the teachers at the end, and they're going, "We're going to do this once a term, or maybe once every, twice a term. Like this is great. Like we're all having fun here." And I suppose like that's what it's about, right? Learning is meant to be fun. Like, and if everyone can have fun, and it's also about like breaking down those barriers, like which is really hard when you're going into schools, like to kind of break down those barriers to kind of get people to play.
that's awesome. We're reaching kind of the end of the. I mean, I could talk about if you could have like 2 more hours, I'd be happy. But in the interest of time, I get to the last question that I ask everybody on this podcast. If you were to design a school around one thing, it can be something physical, it can be a concept, it can be anything. What would it be?
Okay, so I would create the Creative Constructionist School, and it would be student centered. It would be about today's world and and it would work with the world as opposed to behind, the history of the world. It will work towards like the rapidly changing world. It would be about making and designing, community based, and it would engage kind of through STEAM. um, I think also something that's really important is involving parents in their schooling. So getting parents to kind of work alongside in this community and be part of this community is really important. Why? Because we need children to like develop their own metacognition. So understanding like how they learn, like how they're going to become resilient, like reflect on their own learning, develop empathy, and have a strong sense of like social responsibility. We need to have social responsibility in this world today, and we need to be thinking about how children can be responsible for our world and the future of it.
Yeah, I want to go. I want to go to that school.
Yeah, same.
That sounds that sounds like a great space.
I don't know if some of you want to share one
No, no,
or
I'm going to go with
yeah,
Emma's.
okay. Sounds good. That
It's
sounds good.
actually.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Tom and Matt, for taking the time. It was a really exciting conversation. Where can people find more information about you and about the Institute of Imagination?
Yeah, so just head over to ioi.london. You can find out more about us there, and you can pick up on our socials there too. And yeah, we have like various social channels which update on what we're doing, and we're going to update about this because this has just been a fantastic conversation. Sorry, really fantastic conversation, and really nurturing and fulfilling. And yeah, thank you for inviting us, Matteo. It's been really, really great.
Thank you. Really appreciate that. I mean, that's one of the treats of like doing this podcast, is getting to speak with people like both of you are really inspiring to me, and being able to share what you're working on with a lot more people is that's just a treat for me. So I'm really happy to do that. So thank you for taking the time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.